Why Viking Berserkers were Europe's most feared warriors. In the year 872, chroniclers described warriors who fought without armor, without shields, and seemingly without fear itself. 12 of these men reportedly stood at the front line of King Harald Fairhair's army at Hafrsfjord. Witnesses claimed they growled like wild animals and bit down hard directly on their own shield rims. Enemy soldiers allegedly dropped their weapons entirely and fled the field before a single blow had even landed. These men were called Berserkers, and their fearsome reputation echoed across an entire continent for nearly 3 centuries. But were they truly fearless supermen lost to madness, or something far more calculated and deeply human? Today, we step deep inside the mystery of the Berserkers, warriors whose legend still shapes the Viking Age. To understand the Berserkers properly, we must first set aside the image most people already carry today. The popular version shows a shirtless madman swinging an axe wildly in mindless rage across the battlefield. That image comes largely from centuries of retelling, romantic poetry, and modern cinema rather than genuine sources. The real question here is not whether berserkers existed, because multiple independent sources confirm that they did. The more useful question is what kind of warriors these men actually were within their own society. Were they simply unstable men who lost control completely in the chaos of open, brutal medieval battle? Or were they instead trained specialists who deliberately used fear itself as a calculated weapon of war? Norse society, at least in its earliest recorded form, did not treat berserkers as reckless, undisciplined fighters. They were tied closely to specific warbands, to reigning kings, and to religious traditions surrounding Odin himself. Understanding the berserkers properly means understanding exactly how organized fear functioned as a deliberate tool of ancient warfare and diplomacy. It also means asking honestly who actually benefited from that fear and at what lasting human cost. This reframing matters enormously because the popular image conveniently hides a far more complicated, layered historical reality. It replaces careful analysis with pure spectacle, and spectacle rarely survives close, honest scrutiny of any kind. So we begin not with legend and cinema, but with the actual sources that first shaped it. The word berserker likely derives from Old Norse, meaning either bear shirt or possibly bear shirt entirely. Some scholars argue the term referred to warriors who wore bear pelts into combat as a symbol. Others argue it instead meant fighters who charged into battle without any armor protecting their bodies at all. Both readings point toward the same underlying idea: a warrior deliberately operating outside all normal wartime rules. Our earliest and most reliable sources are skaldic poems, composed by professional court poets serving Norwegian kings. The poem Haraldskvedi, composed specifically for King Harald Fairhair, describes berserkers proudly as the king's elite guard. It calls them wolf coats, describing men who howled like animals and gnawed the rims of their shields. This was not casual description, but formal praise poetry deliberately composed to honor genuinely feared, respected fighters. Centuries later, the sagas of Icelanders instead present a strikingly different picture of these same legendary warriors. In these later sagas, berserkers frequently appear not as heroes, but as antagonists, bullies, or dangerous outsiders. This sharp contradiction sits directly at the center of understanding the berserker legend accurately across different periods. Earlier sources honor berserkers as elite royal guards, fiercely loyal to their king and feared by enemies. Later sources written centuries after Scandinavia's conversion to Christianity, instead treat these same warriors with open suspicion. That dramatic shift in reputation did not happen purely by accident, and it tells its own story. To understand exactly why this shift occurred, we first need to examine what these warriors actually did. The sagas do not describe berserkers only as an anonymous mass of howling, faceless warriors on distant battlefields. One of the most famous named examples is Kveldulf, grandfather of the poet Egil in Egil's saga. Kveldulf was described as a shapeshifter who grew immensely strong and dangerous once evening fell each day. His own family reportedly feared his rages, showing that even close allies viewed Berserkergang with real caution. Another legendary figure is Bödvar Bjarki, chief champion of King Hrolfar Kraki within Hrolf's saga Kraka itself. Bjarki reportedly fought in a trance so deep that his physical body appeared to remain motionless nearby. Meanwhile, a great bear was seen fighting on the battlefield, said to be his spirit made visible. Whether read literally or symbolically, this saga links berserker combat directly to shape-shifting and animal transformation myths. A related group, the Ulfhednar, or wolfcoats, appear in several sources as wolf-themed counterparts to bear-shirted berserkers. Snorri Sturluson, writing in the 13th century, described Odin's own warriors as men who fought without armor entirely. He wrote that they were as mad as dogs or wolves, and reportedly as strong as bears or bulls. Snorri claimed that neither fire nor iron could harm them once they had entered this frenzied state. Physical evidence supports these written accounts to some degree, most famously through the 12th century Lewis chessman carvings. Several berserker rook pieces among the Lewis chessmen are carved biting directly into the edges of their own shields. This small, striking detail matches skaldic poetry almost exactly, suggesting shield biting was a recognized and widely known behavior. Taken together, these named figures and artifacts confirm berserkers were not simply a literary invention created for dramatic effect. They were remembered individually, by name, across multiple centuries, genres, and even physical objects crafted for entertainment. According to multiple independent accounts, berserkers reportedly entered a distinct altered state before combat known as Berserkergang. Witnesses across several sources describe trembling limbs, chattering teeth, and a strange swelling of the whole face. Some accounts describe these men biting into their own shields, or howling loudly like wolves and bears. In this altered state, several sources claim these warriors felt little to no pain from wounds received. They reportedly showed no visible fear of fire, of enemy blades, or overwhelming numbers of hostile soldiers. Modern historians treat these dramatic details with real scholarly caution, rather than accepting them as literal fact. Saga writers frequently exaggerated dramatic battlefield scenes for entertainment value and for subtle political commentary as well. However, this same core pattern appears repeatedly across independent sources drawn from very different regions and centuries. That consistency strongly suggests something historically real was being described, even if details grew exaggerated over time. Ancient warfare, across nearly every culture, depended heavily on morale, tight formation, and constant psychological pressure alone. A small number of warriors who appeared genuinely immune to fear could break an enemy formation apart. This is not simple superstition, but sound military logic understood independently across many ancient warrior cultures worldwide. Fear, quite literally, moves faster across any battlefield than a single blade or thrown arrow ever could. If 12 men appeared truly unstoppable, hundreds of enemy soldiers might simply refuse to keep fighting at all. This, far more than raw physical strength alone, was the Berserker's true and most genuinely valuable weapon. The obvious question that naturally follows from all of this is deceptively simple to actually state clearly. How exactly did these warriors enter such an extreme and terrifying combat state in the first place? This is precisely where historical certainty ends, and genuine, unresolved scholarly debate begins in earnest today still. One especially popular theory claims berserkers consumed a hallucinogenic mushroom called Amanita muscaria before entering open battle. This mushroom can reportedly cause vivid hallucinations, significantly altered pain perception, and sudden bursts of raw energy. It is undeniably a compelling theory, and it appears constantly across popular documentaries, books, and video games. However, no surviving primary Norse source ever explicitly mentions mushrooms in any direct connection with berserkers at all. This theory actually originated centuries later, in the 18th century, proposed by a single Swedish naturalist scholar. It therefore remains unproven modern speculation, not an established fact rooted in any genuine Norse source material. A second competing theory suggests heavy alcohol consumption before battle may have induced this altered state instead. This explanation is certainly plausible, since Norse warriors quite clearly drank alcohol before both raids and battles. Yet alcohol alone struggles considerably to explain the very specific symptoms described repeatedly across so many sources. A third theory, currently favored by many respected historians, instead points toward genuinely self-induced psychological trance states. Extreme physical exertion, rhythmic ritual chanting, and controlled, deliberate hyperventilation can reliably trigger significantly altered psychological states. Combined with the natural adrenaline surge produced by real battle conditions, this could produce many described symptoms. This theory also fits neatly with existing evidence of organized religious ritual tied closely to Odin worship. Warriors specifically devoted to Odin may have trained deliberately over years to enter this trance-like readiness at will. Under this reading, Berserker Gang was not some chemical accident at all, but a carefully cultivated spiritual practice. We simply cannot know with complete certainty which of these three competing explanations is genuinely correct today. What we can confidently say instead is that the resulting effect, however achieved, was real enough to matter. Whatever ultimately caused this altered state, the Berserkers' fearsome reputation clearly became a genuine tactical asset for kings. Kings routinely placed Berserkers directly at the front of their shield walls, where enemy morale mattered most. Their mere presence alone could visibly unsettle enemy soldiers, often well before a single weapon was raised. King Harald Fairhair reportedly employed exactly 12 berserkers as his own personal elite royal bodyguard force directly. This arrangement was clearly not simple decoration, but a calculated investment in genuinely effective psychological warfare itself. A king surrounded by men widely rumored to feel no pain naturally projected an overwhelming, near supernatural power. Enemies facing that fearsome reputation often had to quickly decide whether to fight, flee, or negotiate instead. This gave ambitious kings genuinely valuable political leverage in disputes that never even reached open, formal battle. But this weapon carried real, growing costs that became heavier as Scandinavian society gradually changed over time. Berserkers were, almost by their very design, extremely difficult men to control once real violence had begun. Several sagas describe berserkers attacking their own allies, breaking prior agreements, or continuing violence after battles ended. As Norse society steadily moved toward centralized kingship and formal law codes, this became a serious problem. A warrior essentially immune to normal social restraint could threaten public order just as easily as enemies. The very same trait that made berserkers valuable during wartime made them dangerous during periods of peace. This underlying tension between clear usefulness and growing danger ultimately defines the entire second half of their history. By roughly the 11th century, the formal legal status of berserkers had changed quite dramatically across Scandinavia. Iceland's own law code, known as the Gragas, explicitly outlawed berserker gang entirely, punishing offenders with formal banishment. Norway soon passed remarkably similar laws, officially treating berserker rage as a criminal act rather than tradition. This represents a genuinely striking reversal from earlier court poems that had once praised these same warriors. Several distinct factors help explain this shift, and importantly, none of them involve a single simple cause. First, Scandinavian kingdoms steadily centralized political power, and unpredictable warriors increasingly threatened a king's exclusive control over all. A stable king needed consistently loyal, disciplined armies, not independent men who answered only to trance or impulse. Second, Christianity gradually arrived across all of Scandinavia and fundamentally reshaped existing cultural ideas about honor and self-restraint. Church authorities specifically viewed uncontrolled rage and supposed animal transformation as spiritually dangerous, even demonic in origin. Sagas written well after Scandinavia's conversion frequently recast berserkers as villains, petty bullies, or dangerous social outsiders. Christian saga writers increasingly used berserkers as narrative devices, deliberately testing the moral courage of Christian heroes. This shift certainly does not mean berserkers vanished completely and immediately from actual Scandinavian warfare as a whole. It instead means their broader social value simply collapsed far faster than their battlefield reputation ever did. By the time most surviving sagas were finally written down, berserkers had become symbols of a wilder, pre-Christian past. That gradual transformation ultimately tells us something important about exactly how societies choose to rewrite their own history. So, taking all of this evidence together, what can we say with real historical confidence about berserkers? Elite warrior groups closely linked to specific ruling kings, and to Odin, quite clearly did exist historically. These warriors deliberately cultivated a reputation for absolute fearlessness that provided genuine tactical advantages for their kings. Whether this state was achieved through ritual, mind-altering substances, trained trance, or simple adrenaline remains genuinely unresolved. The exact underlying mechanism ultimately matters far less than the clear strategic function these warriors served for centuries. Fear itself was the real and lasting weapon, and berserkers were simply its most visible historical expression. Their broader social value eventually declined, not because this psychological tactic ever actually stopped working against enemies. It declined instead because increasingly centralized states could no longer tolerate warriors operating entirely outside legal control. This is therefore not a simple story about savage men helplessly lost to uncontrollable bloodlust and rage. It is instead a more complex story about how societies deliberately weaponize fear, then later fear that weapon. Nearly every institution throughout history that relies heavily on controlled violence eventually faces this exact same tension. Norse society was certainly not unique in first creating and later carefully restraining its own feared fighters. First, Organized psychological warfare is genuinely as old as organized combat itself, and not a modern invention. 12 determined men who simply appeared unstoppable could reliably break enemy morale well before combat had begun. Second, extreme military tools inevitably carry extreme hidden costs, and those costs rarely stay contained to battle. A weapon specifically designed to terrify one's enemies will eventually threaten the very society that created it. Third, historical reputation shifts primarily according to changing political needs, and not simply according to unchanging fact. Berserkers were celebrated as heroes by early court poets, yet later condemned as villains by Christian writers. The warriors themselves likely did not fundamentally change much at all, but the societies describing them did. Fourth, genuine uncertainty is not actually a weakness within serious history, but an honest reflection of evidence. We simply do not know with certainty exactly what caused Berserkergang, and pretending otherwise misleads modern audiences. The most intellectually honest answer available today is that multiple competing explanations all remain genuinely plausible still. What actually survives today is not one single settled fact, but a powerful legend built from real fear. That particular fear was carefully calculated, genuinely useful to ambitious kings, and ultimately impossible to fully control. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, legends persist precisely because they answer emotional needs, not factual ones alone. Audiences today still crave stories of warriors who transcend ordinary human limits through willpower or ritual devotion. Berserkers satisfy that craving perfectly, offering a compelling blend of genuine history and irresistible, almost mythic imagination combined together. Recognizing that blend does not diminish the Berserkers, but instead makes their true, complicated history genuinely more interesting. A purely factual warrior is forgettable, while a warrior wrapped in mystery, ritual, and unresolved debate endures across centuries. This does not mean the historical Berserkers were fictional, only that their surviving image blends fact with powerful imagination. Separating those two threads honestly is the real work of historical analysis, not simply repeating the most exciting version. That honest separation, in the end, respects both the discipline of history and the enduring power of legend itself. This is precisely why Berserkers, unlike countless forgotten medieval soldiers, remain a defining symbol of the Viking Age. The last confirmed references to Berserkers fighting openly in Scandinavian warfare come from the 11th century itself. At the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030, sources describe Berserkers fighting fiercely beside King Olaf Haraldsson himself. Olaf died that day, and his death eventually transformed him into Norway's patron saint, Saint Olaf himself. Ironically, the century that saw Berserkers formally outlawed also saw Norway fully embrace organized Christian kingship completely. Later Norwegian history preserves an echo of Berserker tradition through the Birkebeiner, meaning birch legs, a rugged royal faction. The Birkebeiner supported King Sverre Sigurdsson in the 12th century, famously wearing birch bark wrapped around their legs. While not formally called Berserkers, chroniclers described the Birkebeiner using similarly intense, almost frenzied language regarding their combat behavior. This suggests the underlying cultural memory of fearsome, trance-driven warriors persisted long after the original legal bans. By the 13th century, when Snorri Sturluson compiled his major historical works, Berserkers already belonged firmly to the past. Snorri wrote about them as a distant phenomenon, something remembered rather than something actively witnessed around him. This transition from lived military reality into distant historical memory happened remarkably fast across only a few generations. Within roughly 2 centuries, elite royal bodyguards had become outlawed criminals, and then finally became purely literary legend. That rapid transformation itself reveals how quickly a society can rewrite even its most feared and celebrated warriors. The Berserkers did not disappear because history forgot them, but because their specific social function disappeared entirely. Kings no longer needed warriors who operated outside normal command structures. Once centralized states had matured fully. Standing armies, organized taxation, and formal law codes offered more predictable, sustainable power than any single feared war band ever could. What remained afterward was the story endlessly retold, reshaped, and eventually exported far beyond Scandinavia's own borders. Berserker reputation did not remain confined only to Scandinavia, but spread outward through raiding, trade, and mercenary service. English chronicles describing Viking raids on monasteries often emphasized terrifying, animalistic behavior that closely echoes descriptions of Berserkergang itself. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, recording 9th century raids, repeatedly stresses sudden, overwhelming violence that left defenders too frightened to organize resistance. Frankish sources describing Viking attacks along the Seine River used similar language, describing warriors seemingly indifferent to danger. This pattern extended even further east, into the Byzantine Empire, where Norse warriors served as the elite Varangian Guard. Byzantine writers, including the historian Michael Sellos, described these northern guardsmen as extraordinarily fierce, loyal, and physically imposing fighters. While Byzantine sources rarely use the word berserker, the intensity described closely matches earlier Scandinavian accounts of trance-driven combat. This suggests the underlying reputation, whatever its true cause, traveled successfully wherever Norse warriors carried their swords and axes. European chroniclers, writing from Ireland to Constantinople, consistently portrayed Northmen as warriors who fought with unusual, almost supernatural ferocity. That widespread cross-cultural reputation helped cement the broader Viking image as fundamentally different from typical medieval European armies. It is worth noting that fear, once established across multiple independent cultures, tends to reinforce and amplify itself considerably. Every new raid confirmed existing rumors, and every rumor made the next raid feel even more terrifying beforehand. In this sense, the Berserker legend was not built by Norse warriors alone, but by frightened observers everywhere. Their accounts, however exaggerated, ensured that berserkers became one of medieval Europe's most enduring symbols of dread. Irish annals, describing Viking raids on monastic settlements, similarly emphasize sudden assaults that left communities completely unprepared. These repeated descriptions, appearing independently across Ireland, England, Francia, and Byzantium, reveal something beyond simple exaggeration or shared convention. They reveal that Norse warbands actively cultivated this fearsome reputation, using it as a genuine strategic advantage. A defender who already believed Northmen were unstoppable was more likely to surrender quickly rather than risk open resistance. Written sources alone cannot fully confirm berserker practices, so archaeology offers an important, independent second layer of evidence. The Torslunda plates, small bronze dies found on the Swedish island of Öland, depict warriors wearing wolf head masks. These plates, dated to roughly the 6th or 7th century, predate most surviving written sagas by several hundred years. This gap matters because it suggests costume traditions linked to animal transformation existed well before saga writers recorded them. Archaeologists have also found grave goods featuring bear claws, wolf teeth, and animal pelts buried alongside high-status warrior remains. While such items cannot prove trance states occurred, they strongly support genuine links between elite warriors and predatory animals. Helmet plates from Vendel-era Sweden similarly depict warriors in animal-themed dress, fighting beside spear-wielding figures identified as Odin. Taken together, this evidence spans centuries before the Viking Age, suggesting animal warrior symbolism was already embedded within Norse life. This timeline actually strengthens the case that Berserkergang reflected genuine, long-standing ritual rather than pure literary invention centuries later. It also complicates the simple mushroom theory, since costume and ritual symbolism predate any documented contact with hallucinogenic substances. Archaeology, in this sense, does not settle the debate over cause, but it firmly confirms cultural continuity across centuries. Physical objects and written poetry, created independently across different eras, describe similar warriors bound to fear, ritual, and transformation. The Berserker phenomenon was not entirely unique within world military history, though its specific form remained distinctly Norse. Ancient Greek sources describe similar warrior frenzy among Thracian and Celtic tribes, who reportedly charged naked into battle screaming. Roman historians recorded Celtic warriors called Gaisate, who fought without armor and relied on sheer terror to unsettle legions. Centuries later, Japanese samurai culture developed its own relationship between ritual, spiritual devotion, and controlled aggression through Zen practice. Zulu regiments under King Shaka similarly used coordinated tactics, including rhythmic chanting and formation changes, to terrify colonial opponents. What separates berserkers from most of these parallels is the claim of complete physical invulnerability during their altered state. Most other warrior traditions emphasized discipline, coordination, and controlled aggression, rather than a fully trance-induced, seemingly pain-immune combat frenzy. This distinction matters because it shaped how later medieval and modern audiences specifically remembered and mythologized the Norse warriors. Where other traditions became associated with discipline and honor, berserkers became associated instead with uncontrollable, almost supernatural fury. That specific reputation proved remarkably durable, surviving centuries of retelling across sagas, chronicles, artwork, and modern popular culture. Comparing berserkers to these traditions helps clarify what made them historically distinctive within the broader landscape of ancient warfare. It was not simply their courage or their skill with weapons, both common among elite warriors everywhere. It was instead the specific, culturally embedded claim that fear itself could be physically and spiritually transcended through ritual. That claim, true or not, gave berserkers a psychological edge that rival warrior traditions rarely managed to replicate. Understanding this context helps separate what was genuinely unusual about berserkers from what reflected common features of ancient warfare. The berserkers, in the end, were not simply madmen helplessly lost to uncontrollable rage during endless battle. They were, in some very real sense, a deliberate weapon built almost entirely from calculated, disciplined fear. That weapon served ambitious kings brilliantly for generations, right up until their societies no longer needed it. If you had personally commanded a Viking warband in the 10th century, would you have truly trusted a berserker fighting at your side? Let us know your honest answer down in the comments section, directly below this video. If this deeper look into the real history behind the berserker legend interested you, Leave a like and subscribe, and join us next time as we uncover more forgotten stories from the Viking Age.